Welcome everyone. I am Osman Kuzucu, and today I'll actually be talking about blockchain-based identification. It's actually a really nice topic that at the previous panel we actually talk about. In order to own data we should be owning the identities, or we should have some sort of control over the identities we have. Before I get started, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Osman Kuzucu. I am the CEO of Omchain Foundation. I got into crypto in 2011, and my journey has been long enough, and this is one of the tweets that I shared in 2013. I said that Bitcoin won't be seeing $400, so if you want to get involved with cryptocurrencies, wait a little bit more. But at the end of that month, the Bitcoin price hit already $1,000. I wrote articles, I developed smart contracts, so I'm a software developer. I made interviews with largest exchanges in the world. I mined Bitcoin and Ethereum when people were not even talking about it. I traded cryptocurrencies, and finally I created Omchain. So the main question here is, how do we actually identify ourselves? I mean, if we actually think about it, we have two different identification systems right now. One of them is offline. When we came to this event, we first went to the registration booth, and then we showed the QR code and then ID, right? We identified with a document. This is the first part, because we obtain an ID from an authority, which is usually issued by our governments or local authorities, and then we make sure that this ID is valid, right? Because if the ID is not valid, then it's not going to work. Try, traveling with an expired passport. You're going to have a lot of problem. And then we prompt the ID card only when necessary. So we don't have, our ID cards at all times at our hands while we are walking on the street. But for example, in such situation, in this event, we have our badges, worn, right? We have our badges shown, and then the QR code is scanned. So the usual offline ID card looks something similar to this. You can see here, Dow Jones. But we're not actually the forensic experts, right? What if I right now, took out my wallet here, because I'm a Turkish national citizen, I showed you my ID card and I said, hey, I am Osman Kuzucu, right? You can read my name, you can see that it's my national ID, but how do you verify it? You're not a forensic expert, you're not a, genuine ID expert, you're not even, most of you, I assume, are not even Turkish citizens, so how would you identify me, aside from this event? Right now, you know that I am here on the Binance's authority because I was presented to you. But if you actually had seen me on the street, you wouldn't know it. And in fact, even the worst case, if someone approached you on the street and claimed that they were a police officer or some sort of, local authority, you would have, problem identifying or whether that ID is real or not. So this is the main problem with the existing identification solutions. If there is no internet presented, and it's offline identification. And when we move things to online, what we have is we create an email, and then we create accounts with that email. So you go to Instagram, you go to Facebook, you go to Twitter, all those platforms, you type in your email address, and then you create an account. But the main problem here is that we rely on this email account so much that if we lose access to that email account, anything that is tied to that email account is now, at the risk of getting lost. That's the reason why I believe most of us are still sticking to the emails that we generated when we were a college student or a high school student. Again, the email actually, if you also think about it, the email is actually for sending and receiving electronic mails. So you wouldn't go to, a bank and say, hey, I want to open an account, and this is my address. This is where I receive my mail. This is when I shop from Amazon, what is delivered to me at that address. The teller at the bank would still say, sir, we still have to see, some ID that is authorized by someone, because just by knowing that something that I can deliver to you reaches you, I cannot verify your identity. But if we actually think about the online world, this is actually how it is. We just provide them some email address, and then, we try to build our identity on top of that. So because we identify with emails, us users would have to constantly deal with spams because our email is associated with a lot of different platforms, websites, a lot of online forums, and then we would still keep receiving phishing attacks because the main reason is that person is not actually trying to read our emails most of the time, but they want to take control of our email account so that they can, have access to our online banking account or our social medias or extract more data from that email because this is the, identification point on the internet. And we won't be able to change our email address. I know that probably we have crazyboy77@hotmail.com at the audience. When you go to bank and trying to open an account, you give some email address that you created in high school. This still happens to me because my apparently iCloud account is the one that I have been using since primary school. So whenever someone asks me to, send a test flight request, I have to give them something similar to that. It's even more, I'm not going to go into too much details. I feel ashamed. Just kidding, I'm not. So the thing is, in the service provider side, so this is the user side, right? We have to deal with this. But the service providers also, they have to deal with fake accounts. How many of the people in the audience have previously worked in a software product that receives user applications or user accounts? Maybe you would know that there are a lot of fake accounts. Even I am amazed. Some airdrop campaigns we have fake Gmail accounts. I don't even understand how people can bypass the Google's verification system just to claim some $2-3 worth of airdrop. And another point is GDPR compliance, because once you attach user's email, it's actually similar to a user's address, a physical address. So this is actually a personal data. Once you start attaching data to that email address, you're actually creating data that is associated with that individual human being, and then you start being responsible. And then you also have to trust that Gmail is not going to be, or any other mail provider is not going to be, cutting access to the email of your users. So if I am signing up to Instagram with my Gmail account, if Gmail blocks me to access my account, then I immediately probably lose access to my Instagram or lose the ability to change my password. So if I am developing a software as well, why do I have to rely on, Google? Why do I have to rely on, someone being able to access their email just to have an account on my platform? And then again, in order to verify, password resets, requests, etc., you have costs associated with SMS and email verification. So there is, you might say, okay, hey, Osman, when we're using email, we don't necessarily type our email account anymore. There are different alternatives. There are like Google sign-in, Apple sign-in, for developers, they're like GitHub sign-in, right? Most of us are these days using that one. We don't, necessarily type our email addresses. But then this is the more or less where it's headed. Because in 2012, we only had Netflix, and then we were like, okay, all of the shows that I wanted to watch are now in one platform. And then out of competition, we have now a lot of different streaming platforms that are offering a lot of different shows, and then we keep we lose our track on choosing which provider we should be subscribing. Do I have to subscribe to Netflix, HBO Max, Hulu, or Disney Plus, or Amazon Prime? And then we just say, nope, I'm just going to go straight to YouTube and try to watch whatever there is there. So this is more or less the situation with the easy signups right now. There are 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 of them, if I am not counting wrong. So we already have a lot of different easy sign-in methods, which is going to be making things even harder in the foreseeable future. And another question here is, right now we're at this event, right? We're talking about self-custody. We're talking about, wallets. We're talking about Web3. We're talking about our tokens and NFTs. So when we're talking about our tokens and NFTs and financial assets, when we're talking about self-custody on owning those assets, but why are we not talking about our identity in the same way? Our identities right now, if they're associated with an email account, is just at the fingertips of the email provider. If they want to cut access to our funds, so we're always worried about what if the exchange goes bankrupt? What happens if the exchange shuts down? So I have to own my own wallet. But what happens if your email provider shuts down? What happens if your email provider thinks that, they want to block your access to that email service? Just because it does not happen right now doesn't mean that it won't happen or it can't happen. So this is one of the, major questions and points that I believe we should be asking ourselves. So next, I would like to be mentioning the 3 A's of data sharing cycle for our identities. So authentication, authorization, and access control. So the current state is they're all controlled by the email providers. And our solution is making them the authentication and authorization. So first I have to authenticate myself, and then I have to authorize another service provider to access data, and then there is the access layer. So our solution is making authentication and authorization self-custodian. And how do we do it? We do it with public key cryptography. It's W3C DID standard compliant. It's also GDPR compliant. And user owns their private and public key, not the public key, of course. User owns their private key, so it's full custody. So the issuance is very simple. User just generates a wallet address, and then there is this ID provider, which is the authority. It could be your bank, it could be your school, it could be your local government, or it could be entirely some DAO that is issuing you an ID that allows you to log into that DAO's forum or web platform. So we're not talking about who is the ID provider, but we're just talking about how it could work. And then once that ID provider registers an NFT on behalf of you to your wallet address, you're good to go. You now have your digital ID. And once you want to authenticate yourself, what you do is you just wallet connect to the third-party service provider, and then it resolves whether you own a necessary ID, and that's it. So once it resolves, it knows that, okay, that person can log in. And once you're authorizing, it's a two-step thing. So the third-party service provider sends an access request to your private key, your wallet, and you just provide access to them, and then they take that signed authorization data and provide it to your ID provider and say, hey, this person gave me an explicit consent to access their data, and then they verify it, and then you're logged in. So the problems it solves, that goodbye to verification of SMS costs, goodbye to the trust on email providers, goodbye to the disputes, legal battles regarding authorization authentication, and goodbye to integrating multiple ID providers and standards. I am fastening up a little bit because I believe I am short in time. Just one more minute. So our case studies, we're actually working with the municipality of this very beautiful 18 million citizens living city. So we're hoping to transform more than 15 million citizens on our infrastructure to have their digital IDs issued on our infrastructure. I believe this is the first DID issuance at that scale, because we're talking about 15 million citizens getting blockchain-based identification that is integrated to a mobile application. So the final word is that Omchain is transforming, we're transforming our understanding of identities, just like how Bitcoin changed our understanding of wealth. Thank you for listening to me. So I have to be a little bit fast. If you have any questions after that, you may find me at the hall. Thank you.